Hello, it's Baz at GotAUkulele with another beginner's tip video, which is something people have asked me to expand upon, and that is we're going to be talking about setup and intonation on a ukulele, and give you a bit of a demonstration as best I can without having to take apart and destroy one of my instruments. People wrongly will regularly talk about the reason that you should go to a good ukulele dealer is that they will give you a full setup. That's wrong. Very few dealers, unless they know you intimately, can give you a full setup when you're in the store, because it requires them to know some of the variables that you can alter and how you like the action on your uke, low, medium, high, which they rarely do know, so they set them to an acceptable standard. So let's just explain a little bit more about what I'm talking about there. Action and setup basically govern the way the strings are held across the ukulele, down the neck and across the body, between the nut at this end and the bridge saddle at this end. That's a fixed distance, and it's important that that distance is accurate because the frets are laid out on the assumption of the accuracy of that length, and therefore they play the right notes, or the notes that you expect them to play when you fret the ukulele. Mathematics comes into it, and that the mathematical concept is that ideally we would have the strings completely flat and parallel to the fretboard, and there would be no stretching or any distance to them in changing them when they fret. But if that was the case, the ukulele would buzz and be unplayable. So we naturally have to have this lift coming off from the saddle, and higher at the saddle and coming down to the nut. So a good setup is one that allows playability without compromising intonation, which is the tuning accuracy at the individual frets, as best we can within the confines of the technicalities of the instrument. Sorry if this sounds complicated, but it really is just a balancing act like that. And a well-intonated and well-built instrument will not only play fast, particularly down this end of the neck, but will be accurate when you're checking things like the 12th fret against the open string, which should be exactly the same note, one octave higher than all the other frets will play. So, as I say, the two elements that can be adjusted are mainly the saddle, but also the nut of the instrument. And I think certainly when it comes to the saddle, this is the one area where any ukulele player should probably get to grips with how to adjust the saddle on the ukulele that they buy. I think it's just exactly the same as knowing how to change the tyre on a car. If you're a driver, they're designed to be altered. They're designed to be adjustable in most cases. And that allows you to change the action up or down to give you the playability that you want in balance with tunability. So you often may find a ukulele arrives and you think the action is high, and that's manifests itself in tuning problems if it's really high, but also it's about how far you've got to push down the strings at these lower frets, and it can be uncomfortable for lower fretting. I check what is an acceptable action by taking the height from the top of the 12th crown of the 12th fret to the bottom of the string above it, and it should really be no more than just under 1/8 of an inch as a gap, which this is. Nice, close to the frets. Now, it can vary. Some people like it lower than I do. I wouldn't go any higher than about 1/8 of an inch myself, because I think that's just asking for trouble in tunability. But if you go too low, you're going to risk buzzing as the strings are too close to the frets, but also it can kill all of the tone and volume out of the instrument, because the higher the action, you'll get more resonance from the strings. So again, as I say, it's about experimentation and learning about what you want. So how would you change that? Well, I'm not going to take this uke apart because I've got this set just how I like it, plus there's a pickup under there. But basically you would take the strings off and you would remove the white bridge saddle. Now, This is a guitar bridge saddle, but exactly the same concept applies, plus it's bigger so I can show you easier. The top is the compensated bit here. Not all ukulele bridges are compensated, that's fine. The important bit for adjusting the action is the base of it, because that's what you're going to take down. And it really is as simple to take down as getting this held absolutely flat as you can onto a large piece of sandpaper and running it around like this, and then checking it, make sure you've not created a curve or that you've taken more off one side than the other, just keeping it like this between the fingers, slowly check, and I'm afraid it is a painful process, because I'd suggest you take it down very, very carefully, then you put it back in, then you restring, then you check playability. If you still want to take it down, you repeat the process, and it will take you an afternoon to get it there until you start to learn how to judge it by eye and know how much to take off. That's pretty much the easy bit. If you go too far, or indeed if your saddle is already too low and you want to bring it back up, all is not lost, because that is simply a case of shimming it back up. Some people use nothing more than a strip of cardboard or some paper in the bottom of the bridge saddle, strips of wood veneer, things like that, something very thin to bring it back up again. Simple. Or you buy a new saddle, because these cost pennies, and reshape a new one. Very simple to do. The important thing is keeping the base of that bridge saddle flat, because you need good contact with the soundboard inside the bridge mount plate itself to allow the transfer of sound through into the ukulele accurately. If you've got a pickup under there, that is even more important, because you don't want to create spots where the bridge is not pressing evenly on the pickup, because that will lead to different volumes across the strings. So it's just simply, the important thing is to remember to keep it completely flat and sand it like that. That's how you change your bridge saddle action, and it really is that simple. People also ask about the nut. Now this is more difficult. First of all, let's talk about how we know whether the nut is the right height or not. Those slots guide the strings over, but they also are there to hold the strings at the correct height off the fretboard for the lower frets. The giveaway to a problem with a high nut is when you're playing notes that are fretted at frets 1 and 2, they will ring slightly sharp, and that is because you are pushing the string down quite a distance and effectively stretching it in order to reach the fret, because you're so close to this nut. It's having to pull the string down and it throws the tuning out. That's wrong. The way I check, I hold each string down at the 3rd fret. That brings the string down above it, and it should just kiss, as this is doing, the top of the 1st fret when I do that, and it works with all the strings. There shouldn't be any pressure on the 1st fret, because that means you're going to lead to buzzing and the action is too low at the nut. But there certainly shouldn't be any amount of daylight. It should be enough to hold a very thin piece of paper or business card or something like that. It should just come down and touch the top of the 1st fret, and that is perfect for me. If there's lots of daylight, the issue is you've got to be starting to think about taking these nut slots down. Now that is, for a beginner, I think, a job for a guitar tech or a luthier in a music shop to do it for you. But be very careful with the music shop you choose, because if they don't understand a ukulele, they could wreck it. If you want to have a go yourself, I would strongly urge that you don't just use nail files or something like that. You want to use nut files, which are designed for the job, because it's important that as well as taking them down, you want to keep the base of the slot nice and rounded to hold the string, and you also don't want to widen them unnecessarily, because the string will move around in them. You also need to think about the break angles, so the curvature, that the nut is not simply just a flat groove. It should be rolled away down the nut this way, so that the string breaks at the front of the nut in its angle. That's all getting very technical. If you're a beginner, take it to somebody who knows how to do it. But it is a good check, that 3rd fret test. And if you've got masses of daylight here at the 1st fret, not only is that hard work to bring the strings down, but it could throw your tuning out as well. So it's definitely something to check. But don't be afraid of the bridge. That's the important thing. The bridge is easy to sort. The bridge is easy to reverse if you do go too low and you start getting some buzzing down here. It's good to experiment, so you learn to understand what sort of action you like. Don't take my guide of just under 1/8 of an inch above the 12th as being the gospel. You might want it much lower than that. That's fine. And that's why a shop doesn't know how to do a full setup, because only you know how high you want your strings. But it is absolutely essential to an instrument playing properly, and I do get amazed at people who don't want to even touch this, even though they consider themselves die-hard ukulele fans. It's designed to be adjusted, and that is how we deal with setup and intonation on the instrument. I hope that helps. If you're making any adjustments, just remember, go very carefully and go very slowly. And you shouldn't have a problem with some common sense applied. Don't rush into it and start taking a craft knife to the base of a saddle or anything like that, because you're going to end up with a much bigger problem, and you will end up at a music shop getting it fixed. But don't be afraid of this bit. These are meant to be adjusted, and in many cases, that is why on some of the reviews that I do talk about how the ukulele arrives on setup. But if it's a high bridge, I don't score my reviews down for that, because it is literally a 15-minute job for me to take it down. So, and I always adjust the bridges on all ukuleles I buy. So there we are. Not something I'm afraid of. It shouldn't be something you're afraid of either. Hope that helps, and keep playing.